Imagine marrying someone not for love, not for money, but for peace, for a moment of calm in a life that never stops spinning. Imagine bringing a quiet woman into your glittering, high-rise world, a woman so invisible that no one notices her until she opens her mouth, and suddenly the room stops breathing. That was me, CEO of a billion-dollar company, feared, respected, untouchable. Or so I thought. Her name was Claire, a maid, or so everyone believed. Soft-spoken, polite, always blending into the background like hotel wallpaper. But underneath that silence, a mind sharper than any executive I'd ever hired, and secrets that not even I, her husband, knew existed. One day, in a high-stakes meeting that could have destroyed everything I built, Claire spoke. Not just words. She spoke 9 languages, fluently. And suddenly, I wasn't the most powerful person in the room anymore. But this isn't a story about betrayal. It's about discovery. About how love, trust, and identity can be rewritten by a single act of courage. You think you know someone? Think again. This story will take you from skyscrapers to secrets, from arrogance to awe, and you won't want to miss a second. So grab a drink, settle in, and don't forget to subscribe to John's Stories channel for more real emotional drama like this every single day.
I was never the kind of man who believed in fairy tales. I believed in spreadsheets, in shareholder calls, in building an empire one ironclad contract at a time. My name is Ethan Caldwell, CEO of Caldwell Systems, a multinational tech firm with clients in 16 countries and satellites in 4. But for all my power and influence, I lived alone, and not just in the literal sense. My penthouse, perched above Manhattan like a king's throne, was beautiful and cold. I remember once thinking the silence was a luxury. Now I know it was a warning. That night, I stood motionless in my office after a brutal video conference with Marcus, my chief of strategy, and our board of directors. We were about to lose the Usaka deal, a $300 million contract with one of Japan's biggest AI firms. And why? Because no one, not Marcus, not Cynthia, not even our overpriced translator, could speak a word of Japanese that made sense. I remember watching them flail, trying to mask their ignorance with buzzwords and bad accents. My temples pulsed with a headache that no Tylenol could touch. I could see the deal slipping through our fingers. And then, she spoke. Claire, my wife. My quiet, unreadable wife, standing in the corner like she didn't belong, but when she opened her mouth, the entire boardroom went silent. "Shitsuresimasu, Yusaka-sama," she began. Her voice, calm, musical, glided through the Japanese syllables like it was her mother tongue. Not just fluent, immaculate. Her tone, her cadence, it was like watching a violinist take the stage and silence a noisy crowd. Even the Japanese delegates on the screen blinked, surprised, and then they smiled. Claire stepped forward, referencing technical documents none of us had even thought to print out. She explained our integration strategy, cross-compatibility, encryption protocols, all in Japanese. She cracked a joke using an old idiom, and the senior delegate actually laughed. And just like that, the mood shifted. The deal was back on the table. I should have been relieved, but I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I just stared at her, standing confidently in a gray dress I'd bought her offhandedly last week. It looked plain, unassuming, just like her. But nothing about her was unassuming anymore. "Claire," I said after the meeting, when the others had left and it was just us and the echo of stunned silence. "You never told me." She looked at me, not coldly, not defensively, just with a kind of quiet sadness I couldn't decipher. "You never asked." That sentence, that one soft sentence, burned through my pride like acid. I thought I'd rescued her, thought I was the one giving her a second chance. But now it felt like maybe I was the one being saved. 3 months ago, I met Claire in a hotel suite of all places. Not glamorous. I was working late, too tired to drive home. She was the night maid. Quiet, efficient, hands folded, voice barely above a whisper. What struck me first was how unshaken she was when I spilled hot water on my financial reports. Anyone else would have panicked. She just calmly knelt, dabbing the pages with a towel. "If you act quickly, the damage can be minimized." I thought she was talking about the paper, but now I wonder if she meant more. She brewed me coffee from a machine I'd given up on, talked about old book restoration, said her mother was a librarian in Eastern Europe before the economy collapsed. I remember thinking, this woman knows more about preservation than half my R&D department. I started staying at the hotel more often. At first, I told myself it was convenient, but soon I was timing my schedule around her cleaning shifts. She never flirted, never pried, just existed, like a still lake you could see your reflection in if you stared long enough. One night, I asked where she was from. Serbia, a country I'd only ever read about in the footnotes of trade reports. She told me her mother needed heart surgery. $50,000, money she'd never have on her salary. And that's when I said it. That sentence that changed everything. "Marry me." She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. And maybe I had. "I don't want love," I told her. "At least not right away. I want someone I can trust, someone to come home to. I'll take care of you, you'll take care of me. That's it." She didn't answer for 2 days. But when she did, she said, "Only if we promise to respect each other. And if you ever find love somewhere else, you let me go." I thought it was a strange condition. Now I see it was noble. We married quietly. No press, no extravagance. She moved into my penthouse like a ghost in a museum. She didn't redecorate, didn't spend, didn't ask for anything. Just read my books, cooked quiet meals, watched the city like it held answers. But the board, the staff, they whispered. Gold digger. Lucky maid. Marcus and Cynthia were the worst. They treated her like she was ornamental, something I'd picked up for show. I told myself I didn't care. Until the day she shattered their illusions and mine.
I didn't sleep that night. How could I? After what I'd seen, what I'd heard? I paced the length of the penthouse, past the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Manhattan, past the glass dining table that never saw a proper meal, and finally stopped at the doorway of the library, where she was, Claire, my wife. She sat there in silence, curled into the corner of the velvet reading chair I'd bought for decor, not comfort. The gray of her dress melted into the shadows, but her face glowed in the soft light from the lamp beside her. She looked up when she sensed me. Not startled, not guilty, just waiting. "I need to know," I said, my voice low, a tremor slipping in. "Who are you?" She closed her book, not dramatically, just gently, like someone closing the final page on a chapter of grief. "I studied linguistics, graduated top of my class in Serbia, 9 languages. I worked for government delegations, even a few international security conferences." "Then why?" I asked, taking a step forward. "Why were you scrubbing floors in a hotel?" She smiled, not with bitterness, but with something deeper. Because the world doesn't care about degrees when they come from small, war-torn countries. My credentials weren't recognized here. My mother was sick. I needed money. Cleaning was honest work. And for a moment, I was ashamed. Ashamed that I had seen her every day and still never truly looked. She hadn't hidden her intelligence. I just never thought to ask. But I wasn't the only one blind. The next day at the office, whispers spread faster than wildfire that Ethan Caldwell's wife had saved a $300 million deal using flawless Japanese, and that she'd done it better than any executive in the room. HR confirmed everything: her degrees, her certifications, even her prior diplomatic work. Suddenly, everyone had questions, and one person had malice. Cynthia Davies, VP of International Strategy, a woman polished like a diamond, but just as cold. She'd always viewed Claire as an embarrassment, a threat, and now she saw her as a competition. At the German investor dinner, Cynthia thought she'd trap Claire. She said something smug in broken German to one of our VIP guests, Heinrich Müller, the EU's top renewable energy fund manager. Then, with a smirk, she turned to Claire and said, "I doubt Mrs. Caldwell here caught that. After all, her expertise is probably in, what, polishing silverware?" My chest tightened. But Claire didn't flinch. She simply lifted her glass, smiled politely, and responded in perfect articulate German, not just acknowledging Müller's joke, but expanding on it with data and insight about the EU energy strategy that left the entire room stunned. Müller laughed out loud. "Wunderbar, Mrs. Caldwell. You're a gem, a woman of substance." He ignored Cynthia entirely after that. That night, I didn't say much as we got into the car. But when we got home, I turned to her, took her hand in mine, and said the words I never imagined I would say to anyone. "Claire, I don't deserve you." She looked at me, surprised, a little confused, and I added, "Starting tomorrow, I want the world to see what I see. Not my maid, not my wife, not even my savior. Just you, the person who should have been at the table all along." I appointed Claire as the Senior Language and Cultural Strategy Advisor of Caldwell Systems, effective immediately. Not just to appease the board or the press, but because there was no one more qualified. She knew how people thought, not just how they spoke, but why they said what they said. That nuance, that intuition, it was worth more than any MBA in that tower. Some still whispered. Some even plotted. Marcus, my longtime strategist, and Cynthia, with her polished claws, couldn't accept that the quiet woman they mocked now had a nameplate beside mine. They tried to sabotage her. They leaked confidential emails, planted rumors to discredit her credentials, and even tipped off a journalist from a financial gossip blog with falsified HR records. They wanted a scandal big enough to make me doubt her, to destroy what we had both personally and professionally. But what they didn't realize, not everyone at Caldwell Systems was loyal to them. One of Marcus's own assistants, a young intern named Naomi, overheard a phone call between him and the blogger. She'd worked with Claire on a small French localization project, and unlike Marcus, Claire had treated her like a human being, not a coffee delivery robot. Naomi recorded the call, and the next morning she walked straight into my office and played it. The rage I felt was incandescent. That afternoon, in front of the entire senior board, I stood up. Security will escort Marcus and Cynthia out of this building, effective immediately. Gasps, whispers, stunned silence. I looked each executive in the eye. If you have a problem with transparency, with merit, or with respecting someone based on their capabilities and not their origins, then you have a problem with me." The meeting ended in chaos. But something shifted that day. Not just in the company, in me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just a CEO guarding a fortress. I was a man protecting his home. Claire wasn't the threat they thought she was. She was the answer I never knew I needed. Have you ever had a moment where pretending led to something unexpectedly real? Please comment below and like this video if you believe the best love stories start with honesty. Subscribe our channel now for more powerful story-based videos every day.
The fallout didn't end with Marcus and Cynthia. When you publicly dethrone two high-ranking executives, you don't just remove people, you shift power. And when power shifts, the masks come off. For a while, things got tense at Caldwell Systems. You could feel it in the air. The tightened jaws, the sudden silences when Claire entered a room. Not everyone liked the change. Not everyone wanted to be advised by the woman they once dismissed as the quiet housewife. But Claire didn't fight back. She observed. She listened. And then she began to transform the company, not with force, but with finesse. She started with the meetings. Before, our international strategy sessions had always followed the same Western-centric framework: present numbers, talk about KPIs, close with a confident projection. But Claire suggested something different. "Let's look at how people on the other side of the table think," she said one morning as we prepped for a potential partnership with a Gulf investment fund. "Not what they say, but what they value, what their culture teaches them to see as trust, as respect, as integrity." I'll admit, I scoffed at first. I thought it was overthinking, too emotional. But then she sat down with the entire team, showed us past dossiers and recordings, and decoded them like a linguist with a cipher. She didn't just understand language, she understood meaning. And she was right. That week, we rewrote a pitch for the Gulf investors. Instead of hammering numbers, we emphasized legacy, sustainability, generational partnership. We even learned a few Arabic greetings. Claire coached every one of us. I watched her speak to the investors, switch seamlessly to Arabic, not just with vocabulary, but with tone. Soft, respectful, measured. She referenced shared values, even ancient proverbs I couldn't pronounce. We landed the deal. It was one of the largest partnerships Caldwell Systems had ever secured in the Middle East. But the real win? Our team started learning. Young managers would stop by Claire's office just to ask questions. How to phrase things in Mandarin without sounding condescending. How to use silence in Japanese negotiations. How to decode body language in French boardrooms. She didn't lecture. She mentored. You could feel the shift. Respect replaced resentment. Curiosity replaced criticism. It reminded me of a moment from years before, a story I never told anyone. Back when I was still grinding my way up through corporate ranks, I remember being sent to Seoul for a negotiation. I was green, too confident. The deal fell through before it even started, not because of numbers, but because I didn't remove my jacket when I should have. I interrupted a senior director mid-sentence, thinking I was being efficient. No one told me I was being rude, they just withdrew politely. I came home thinking I was too junior, but now I see I was just ignorant. Claire never forgot things like that, because she came from a place where being misunderstood had real consequences. One afternoon, she shared a story with me I'll never forget. Before coming to the US, she worked as a junior interpreter for a humanitarian mission in Eastern Europe. One misinterpreted sentence, one word, could change the course of negotiations between officials and refugee coordinators.
She told me about a woman who lost access to emergency medical aid for her child because someone confused urgent with important. The child died 2 days later. Claire never forgot that. Language, she said, isn't just words. It's survival. It's power. And when you misuse it or ignore it, people suffer. That's when I understood. Claire's silence wasn't submission. It was restraint. And when she chose to speak, it meant something. Months passed. Our company evolved. Claire became more than an advisor. She became a compass. She helped us navigate not just new markets, but new mindsets. One time, she resolved a brewing disaster with an Indian tech partner, something I didn't even know had reached a crisis point. There'd been a major miscommunication over timelines and family obligations during a holiday season. Claire picked up the phone. Not an email, not a legal memo. A phone call in Hindi. She didn't just translate, she apologized in their cultural language. She acknowledged family values, expressed empathy, and suggested a gesture of goodwill. Problem solved. Deal intact. And me? I just stood there in awe. Again. But as Claire rose, not everyone celebrated. I noticed it first in the media. Headlines like, "From Maid to Maven, Ethan Caldwell's unusual advisor." And worse, anonymous tweets questioning her qualifications, her marriage, her intentions. Some came from within the company. We could trace the IP addresses. And for the first time, I saw Claire hesitate. One night, as we sat on the balcony overlooking the city, she finally said it out loud. "Sometimes I wish I'd stayed invisible." I turned to her, heart aching. "No," I said, "no more disappearing, not for anyone." She looked at me, eyes wet, but strong. "Do you know what it's like to be brilliant, but small on paper? To be educated, but ignored because of where you're from? I didn't come here to be saved. I came here to matter."
And she did. More than she ever knew. A year passed. Caldwell Systems was no longer just a tech company. It had become a global force, not just in revenue or reach, but in identity. We were no longer just efficient. We were human. We didn't just sell systems, we built bridges. And at the heart of it all was Claire. Her role expanded from cultural advisor to full international strategy consultant. She wasn't just a name on the org chart. She was a symbol of transformation, of possibility. And people noticed. At first, it was the industry insiders. Then came the business schools, the leadership panels. Eventually, the World Economic Forum sent an invitation addressed not to me, but to her. Claire Caldwell, keynote speaker, topic, Cultural Empathy in Global Economies. The night before the event, I found her rehearsing in the living room. She wore a simple navy dress and had tied her hair back, just like she always did when she meant business. Her voice was calm, poised, but I could see her hands trembling slightly as she held the note cards. "You don't have to prove anything to them," I said softly. She replied, "I'm not trying to prove anything. I just want to show people like me, like the girl I used to be, that we don't have to stay invisible." The next day, I sat in the audience in Davos, Switzerland, surrounded by CEOs, prime ministers, Nobel laureates, and watched my wife step onto the stage like she belonged there all along. She began slowly, with a story, not stats, not graphs. She said,
When I came to the US, I spoke 9 languages, had 2 degrees, and had trained government interpreters. But my first job was cleaning toilets. The crowd stilled. And you know what? She continued. That job taught me more about humility, about perspective, than any classroom. It taught me that words don't always open doors. Sometimes you have to knock. Sometimes you have to build the door yourself. She spoke about trust, about understanding how people feel shapes how they think, about why a meeting in Tokyo needs silence, while a meeting in New York demands boldness, about how cultural fluency is not just a nice to have, it's a business imperative. She ended with this: we live in a world that moves fast, but empathy takes time. If we want to do business that lasts, we need to stop translating and start understanding. The standing ovation lasted for minutes. That night, news outlets around the world ran headlines like, "From Maid to Mogul, Claire Caldwell's vision for global harmony." The woman who spoke 9 languages and finally found her voice. But for me, none of it mattered as much as what happened when we got home. We were back in our penthouse, which, by the way, didn't feel cold anymore. Claire had filled it with books, art, the smell of fresh thyme from her little herb garden on the balcony. She had turned my fortress into a home. And that night, as we curled up on the sofa, I turned to her and asked, "Do you ever miss the quiet?" She thought for a moment, then smiled. "No," she said, "because now when I'm quiet, it's my choice." That hit me hard, because isn't that what we all want? Not fame, not fortune, but freedom. The freedom to be seen and still be ourselves. So here's what I want to leave you with, and I hope you'll remember this long after this video ends. We live in a world obsessed with labels: CEO, maid, foreign, local, powerful, invisible. But titles mean nothing if you don't look deeper. Claire taught me that greatness doesn't always announce itself with a bang. Sometimes it walks in softly, in a gray dress, carrying a cup of coffee, and waits patiently until the world is finally ready to listen. Your value doesn't depend on your background, your accent, or what your resume says. It lies in your resilience, your wisdom, your heart. And if you're still waiting for someone to recognize that, maybe it's time you stop waiting. Maybe it's time you speak. Because someone out there, someone important, someone powerful, maybe even someone like the old me, is just one truth away from finally seeing you. Don't be afraid of your story. Be proud of it. Because it's not where you come from that defines you. It's what you do with it. If this story moved you, if you saw a piece of yourself in Claire or someone you love, please share this video. And don't forget to subscribe to John's Stories. Every day we bring you real drama, human moments, and the reminder that in the noise of the world, your voice matters. Thanks for watching. I'm glad you stayed till the end. I'll see you in the next one.